Okay, let's go ahead and get this meeting started, please. Looks like we do have a quorum tonight. Yes, and Danny's here with us tonight, so we definitely have a full quorum. We need to review the agenda. It's not working?
Got it on?
Yep.
Is it on?
Yep. Got a green light. Shall I speak louder?
Hello? Yeah, I think maybe speaking to it a little more directly, maybe it'll.
This one says it's on.
There it is.
Got it? Okay. All right. We need to review the agenda and approve the agenda. Is there any question or comment on the agenda?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I could, the Board of Supervisors asked that the Planning Commission look into auxiliary dwelling units. And that's not on the agenda, and I would appreciate if you would add that to the agenda. Just for
Okay.
a quick discussion.
I will add that under number 7 for additional items then. Thank you. Any other question or comment on the agenda? Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda? Okay, moved and seconded. Thank you. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right. Review of the minutes. Any question or concerns about the minutes? They look very neat and complete. Thank you, Nathan.
I think there was one item that wants to be removed.
It is the third sentence under
Um.
Item 4C, under discussion.
And delete the whole sentence.
Yeah, delete everything that you're ending.
I actually have some minutes here that I did that too.
Mhm.
So you can sign these at the end.
Okay, excellent. Okay, any other comment or question? All right, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes as amended? Okay, second. Thank you. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Yes. Yes, thank you. Okay, the first public hearing preview will be for case number SU-04-22-12. Mr. Sean Woolfolk has applied for a special use permit to operate a commercial slaughterhouse on an A1 agriculture zone parcel. In the A1 zoning district, a commercial slaughterhouse requires a special use permit. The subject property contains an existing farm exempt agricultural structure utilized seasonally to process wild game. If approved, a new structure addition would be constructed to process livestock. The applicant estimates processing would be limited to 30 to 50 animals monthly. If approved, the facility would be required to adhere to all state and federal regulations. The 21.2 acre parcel does not contain a postal address, but is located on Thrift Road, Route 657. The parcel is identified on Madison County's tax maps as 47-3B. Okay, Ligon, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, sir. I'll just add a few things. There's sort of two, items going on here. Two entities. We have the wild game, which is a seasonal operation, kind of like hunting season, November, December. And then you have an application here for a commercial slaughterhouse. The wild game processing, and I guess it's been there for a few years. I went out there, I know, with Tracy a year ago when this was talked about a year ago. I met Sean out at the site. The wild game, I guess that building that he processes wild game was built, Sean can talk and tell us, but several years ago. I don't think you've been there too long. 20? Okay, so you've been doing a wild game since then?
Yeah.
Okay. And again, I'll let Sean talk more about that and sort of his evolution to now looking at the commercial slaughterhouse. Of course, the commercial, I would, I think it's 30 to 50 a month. Let's just go ahead and say 100 if that was what it is. That to me would be very small scale. Even 100 animals a month outside of the sort of the hunting season. I have some concerns from the neighbor, and it's only been recently that I've kind of been reached out. And of course, with the hearing being advertised, there are concerns. To me, the concerns seem to be more centered around the size of the wild game. Of course, again, that is by right, but there would be some limits on that operation in terms of what they can process. I don't know. And again, Sean can talk about what he's required to do for that as far as, regulations from Ag Department or federal regulations. I generally, those things are exempt from that. But again, I'll let him talk. Concerns sort of centered around, as I see it, the wild game, what's there now, or traffic. You have Ball Top now on Thrift Road. This business is from the wild game, just sort of appears, and everybody I've talked to, talking to Sean and other people, seems to be a very successful business. When I look at the trips on Thrift Road, looking at VDOT data, annual daily trips from Wolftown Hood to the town limits is about, in 2020, on 2/2/2020, it was 120 a day. Now, I'm pretty sure they put those ropes down for like a week, and I'm not totally sure what part of that 4-mile sections they put it. So that would make a big difference. But just to sort of show you, in 2015, VDOT had 110 trips per day on average on that route. So I don't see a lot of change there. But when you get to the town limits and go to Main Street, you have 300 trips. That's just a very small 1/10 of a mile section. In 2015, you had 360. So I don't know if the traffic data, it doesn't seem like it picks up any major changes in the road in that time. But again, sometimes what week you do it, it could just be a fluke. But that is the concern that I'm hearing is existing operation, and as far as the traffic, as far as the entrance goes, I had that little back and forth, just what I put with VDOT. It's a very wide entrance. I don't know if there's really a lot of improvements you can do to a rural road and a large rural entrance. I mean, there's really not a turn lane option. I don't, from a sight distance perspective, I don't think it's dangerous, but if it does have if you do in those peak months of November and December have, several hundred people going in and out a week, I mean, it's just going to be a lot of traffic there. So I kind of separate out what the commercial, what was proposed for this commercial side with the special use permit is for. To me, again, I would say that's very small scale and seems to be kind of minuscule compared to maybe what's going on during hunting season. So between now and April hearing, I'll put together some more details and work what we kind of talk about tonight and what I've gotten from the neighbors and some of the people who have some concerns. We can look at some conditions. Now, whether those conditions will extend to the wild game operation, that's something that we can discuss. So other than that, that's all I have. If any other questions for me or anybody questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Anyone have a question for Ligon on this?
Well,
Okay.
My concern is about these conditions. I would have liked, and this is for future reference as well, I would have liked to have seen the kind of conditions that you would expect to negotiate with the applicant in this meeting, rather than holding them until the joint meeting. I have no idea what those conditions are. One condition might be limiting the new operation to a certain number of livestock every month. All we have at this point is an estimate of 30 to 50 per month. That doesn't strike me as a great number, so I'm inclined to agree with you. But under a special use permit, would the applicant be free to double or triple that number? Absent a condition that limited them in some way. I did read the lady, the neighbors, I guess across the street neighbors, email today, and to me that made a lot of sense. And to tee this up, it would be helpful to know how you and the applicant are going to arrive at a proposal that you want to place before the public, and to know it at this meeting. That's all I have to say about it.
Okay, Faye?
I have a couple of questions. Maybe I missed it along the way. Okay, so the deer operation, the wild game operation is in place in a different building, or will it be in the same place as the new proposed one? And does that go simultaneously with the regular operation of livestock? How does that work? That would definitely impact the number of people going in and out. I'm just curious. I don't know if it would impact them that much. That's one question.
Yeah, well, and I'll let Sean can kind of talk, but it'd be two structures. So it'd be
Existing.
one existing, a second one, and they would kind of work in unison. So, let Sean, the new structure also would be part of the wild game as well. They would work in conjunction. As far as what Peter says, I mean, really up until, I felt, and actually I know the wild games and operating has been there. That was sort of, I didn't really give it a lot of consideration until we did get the feedback that, there were some concerns about the size of that. The only really condition that I was going to propose was really just limiting the commercial side to, again, I just sort of set 100 per month as a condition of the special use permit. So that's why I didn't really go into an exhaustive condition. There are probably a few other things that can come out of this meeting and some of the comments that I've gotten. But yes, back to,
Okay,
Okay,
my other
okay.
question or comment or whatever would be, so the special use permit is going to be established by the board of supervisors.
Mhm.
We don't usually set the conditions that they set. I mean, we don't have to, right? We can have input, but
I mean, you can recommend, sure,
Right.
sure. Mhm.
that's as far as it goes, as far as SUP. That is on their responsibility. So we have to say what we say and then let them decide. So they would set the numbers, they would set the other conditions that they want in the SUP and anything else, obviously a lot more than what we have here. I would like to, it doesn't really matter about the wild game except for the numbers. That's the only reason I would have, because that's already a by right thing. And that's been successful. I was confused about the numbers, but they seem to be all over the place. And I just wish we could report on these with more accuracy if we know what that is.
Okay, Pete?
Again, I got two questions. My first question is, I'm not fully understanding why we're talking about the deer processing. That's not what's being
Right.
asked for here. That's already approved.
Yep.
And I don't think that should be part of this application because he's already had that approved. My second question is, I remember sitting down on that end some years ago, and Sean came in and we gave Sean a permit to be able to operate a slaughterhouse. And I can't recall, but I know that he was here and we gave him something, and that this doesn't cover what we gave him last time, because I remember doing this very well.
Well, maybe this would be a good time to have Sean talk a little bit about what's going on.
Yeah, unless somebody else has a question for Ligon. Okay, I think that would be appropriate. Mr. Woodfuck, would you like to address us?
Hello. Yeah, I don't really anticipate going over the 50. The 30 to 50, we feel really comfortable, about doing that. There is a help situation, so I think that would be one thing there that I think would be very tough to get over that. As far as the question, when we do wild game, we will not be processing domestic animals when we do wild game.
Oh.
We're just only going to be open for roughly 40 months out of the year, 40 weeks out of the year, and then once wild game is over with, we will, go back into domestic animals again.
Yeah, Faye?
Just question, did I hear you say 30 to 50 weekly or 30 to 50 monthly?
30, 50 monthly.
Monthly,
A
that's
month.
right.
Yep.
Just want to make sure.
Yep. I wish I was able to do that, but
I would think it would be hard.
How
got a
many
question that might be able-
truckloads?
You're going to say the same thing I was going to say.
How many truckloads does that represent, 30 to 50?
that's anybody's number. I mean, we have people come by and bring one. I mean, people could bring 5. We actually toured a place today where a guy came and dropped off 15. Obviously, like I can't do 15 in a day, but it varies. You may have, one beef, but someone may bring in 10 hogs or 5 sheep. So it's a little, that one is a little up in the air and kind of out of my control.
But you're not anticipating like 40 animal trailer truck loads coming in. You're talking about
no
singles or small groups.
semis,
Yeah,
nothing like that. Like we're not capable to handle anything like that, and I don't want to do anything like that. I have no
Right.
desire at all.
We have one question I have, Sean, as far as the wild game, are there any oversights from the USDA or locality? Is that just something that's just, is that regulated from anyone or? is that just
No,
sort of-
like Pete was saying, we were in here, years ago. And when I first opened up, I tried to get a special, to see if I needed one. And we were told we didn't need any for wild game only. And then, it was something brought up years ago, and it came to the same conclusion that, and if I did needed one, I would be grandfathered in, not that it would be, so.
Did you happen to see the email that was circulated today by your neighbor? Which struck me as supportive, but
I did, no, sir, I did not.
expressed some concerns. Lincoln, do you have it?
I do.
Could you just read it?
Yeah, I mean, it just says, wanted to know, I guess the press release said 1,100 a year. We had said 30 to 50. I mean, so I
Well,
guess there's-
the way that the metrics work on that, we were doing 500 over a 3-year span.
She, as I recall the email, she was concerned about the nature of Thrift Road being dangerous and not very well maintained, and concerned about cattle trucks coming in. Have you spoken with her at all about that?
I don't even know who wrote the email, so I guess that would be a no.
This email was just circulated actually to just the board of supervisors that copied me. I circulated that to Mr. Webb and Mr. Carpenter to ask Mr. Webb to circulate to the PC. So that just came in today.
I don't really perceive like a cattle trailer being an issue. I would personally be more concerned about people leaving the brewery half drunk, you know what I mean? And wrecking for that versus, a farmer right there in the middle of the day or in the morning dropping off an animal. I mean, but no, sir,
Yes. Pete.
I'd like to speak to that if I could, please, sir. They talk about the traffic from the brewery. The traffic from the brewery is gonna be 4 o'clock in the evening till dark or 10 o'clock, whatever it may be. The people that are gonna carry these farm animals to Sean are gonna bring them in the morning.
yeah,
So the
we,
two traffics are not gonna overlap each other. So far as having the dual traffic on the road, I just don't see that being a problem with the operations being at 2 entirely different times.
our hours will be like 7:30 to 4, 7:30 to 5, or something like that, doing the domestic animals. It'd be nice to run a 24-hour crew, but you know, that's realistic. That's not going to happen. But our hours will be from, you know, say from 7:30 to 4, whether they drop off or whether they pick up. That will still, we will have hours, you know, still 8 hour a day, because main reason is the inspector only works 8 hours a day. And if he's not there, then you can't do nothing anyway.
The other thing that concerns me a little bit, Steve, and I know that Sean had said 30 to 50, and if that's what he said, I know him well enough to know that that's what he's probably going to do. But one of the other things that I think when you start talking about putting a limit on something, let's say that the 4-H kids just had the fair and they've sold all their livestock to all of the public that supported the kids. Now they need to have it butchered. So he may have times that he may have to do a little more than that to help out the 4-H kids. And you got Culpeper, you got Orange, and you got Madison. You know, I'm all for this gentleman being able to help out the 4-H kids.
Well, I think, Sean, I mean, we've in our conversations that you only can do so much. I mean, you just don't have the capacity. But I mean, that, and as said in the ad, and I was just putting it out there just to let people kind of have an idea. But you know, if we did an SUP and put a limit of 100 a month, I mean, I would still consider that to be, you know, really small scale. How many? What do you estimate as far as the wild game? What do you think you're doing?
Probably 2,000.
2009. And as far as using facility for wild game and then going, to, kind of commercial, is that any, as far as USDA goes, there are no issues there, or?
No, I mean, as long as we follow their guidelines, and they have very, very strict guidelines to be able to do that.
But the inspector wouldn't be there when you were doing wild game.
No, sir. Nope.
But it would be otherwise. Inspector would have a.
Yes,
Right,
the 40 bunch that we are doing, processing, they will be there.
One more question.
When
Yeah.
you talk about wild game, is that primarily deer or is it exclusively deer? Or?
It's primarily deer. We do some bear, some wild game. I mean, some wild boar as well. Not many, but we do some. But primarily deer.
And I gather that's a seasonal business.
Yes, sir. Yeah, the season. Well, last year that they started early season comes in September. That didn't really pan out very well, but generally archer season comes in the first Saturday in October, and it goes out the first Saturday in January. Most likely we would try to run domestic up until November because that's when we really get busy. But we will probably try to do domestic at least 3 days a week when archer season is in. But then once November comes, we won't do domestic at all.
And for wild game, and particularly for deer, you're talking about somebody bringing the deer up in a pickup.
Yeah, yes, sir. That's correct. Yep. And to my knowledge, there's never been an accident that anybody coming from my shop has ever been involved in.
Yeah, Faye.
Since we've brought up the email, just the last question that I believe was on that was about retail sales.
Mhm.
And that would be addressed. I think you already are having USD, you are already having inspection, right?
Yes.
So retail sales would be addressed in the SUP. You don't plan retail sales, I assume.
That's a dream of mine, and we're so far from that it's pathetic. Like I would love to be able to do it, but I don't see it being profitable where we're at now, just because we have so many other things going on. But hopefully I can revisit that in the coming years or so.
But retail would be off-site somewhere.
That's
You're
correct.
right,
Yes, sir. That's
maybe.
why it'll be at another time.
Right.
That's it.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Woolfolk? I think I'm mispronouncing your name. Woodfolk, right?
Woodfolk.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
sorry.
Yep. That's okay.
I just have a request for Ligon that if you do negotiate conditions, it would be helpful to send them out in advance of the joint meeting.
Yeah, I'll actually have to have something worked up by next Friday because I'm off the week after that. So the packet will go out in plenty of time for you to review it and think about it that next Friday when it will go out. So
Okay, if I'm understanding you correctly, the concerns about these large numbers that somebody mentioned per year, which you're saying you can't do, you're basically telling us that the size of the facility and the staffing issues would prohibit you from being able to do
Oh
a
yeah,
large
and
number.
I'm
Yeah,
not billing my facility to do 100 animals a month.
right.
I'm billing to do 50 animals a month.
Yeah. So the questions that were being raised about, what did you say, 1,100 a year, or some large number that somebody mentioned just now?
I can see how when that was mystery. I would love to be able to do that many, but
Yeah,
that, I
but it's
mean,
just not
realistically, that's
possible.
not going to happen. It's not even possible.
Yeah.
I mean, not possible.
I mean,
Yeah.
my inclination is to set it at no more than 100 in a month. I mean, that's
And the other point I have is, if you think about this, you're probably talking about, on average, one trip a day. If you have 30 a month, you're not going to have 100 cars a day or 100 trucks
No,
a day coming in.
there's
So
no
it's,
way.
the
No.
traffic is not a huge issue either.
You know, it's some places on our road, it gets tight because, you know, the ditches have washed out and
Right,
VDOT just
right.
hadn't done, but that's mainly going on Thrift towards town,
Town,
not
yeah.
so much coming, and most people come from 230 way, because the other way is just so, you know, so curvy.
Right. And I'm not sure everybody realizes that. They keep saying Thrift Road, but your entrance is actually on the end of Ruth Road
Yes,
there.
sir, that is correct. Yeah.
And that Thrift Road then goes directly over to 230.
Mhm.
Any other questions or comments from
Just one comment. I've mentioned this email that your neighbor sent. And as I said, it was supportive of your application. But I think it would be helpful if you would get it from Ligon.
Yes, absolutely.
And talk to your neighbor about it.
right here.
and we'll obviously I'll meet with Sean this week and we'll sit down and take this feedback and try to come up with something for the next joint meeting as far as conditions that we can present.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns from the planning? Okay, sure. Well, we need the comments from the public. Thank you.
So what I wanted to say is thank them for their $500,000 investment in Madison County. And it was a big deal for the governor. It was our second only APID grant awarded to Madison County and this administration's first APID grant. So the state, not just Madison County, but the state is very excited about this project, and we are agriculture. So it's not going to be unusual to run into people with agricultural products on any of our roads.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Okay, thank you.
Very short. My name's Mike Fisher. I'm from Virginia, and I just say that God knows we need this in Madison County. It takes months to get a whole cow butchered. 12 years, almost a year. Wait, you gotta be quick to get it. So the only other one I know of is in Front Royal. So there are other folks coming on, one in orange. The capacity, I mean, we could have 10 of these, and you still have the need for them. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Any other comments or questions from the planning commission? Okay, thank you. Okay, we have also an anticipated future special use permit application for a short-term rentals glamping / event venue on a roughly 40-acre A1 zoned parcel. The undeveloped parcel is located on Ford's Shop Road, Route 618, and identified on Madison County tax maps as 42-19. Okay, Ligon, would you fill us in on that?
Yes. So Mr. Helmy, Ahmed has been, we've been talking for he's on the go-to meeting. Ahmed, can you hear us?
Yes, Megan, I can hear.
Okay, good. We've been talking for a year, maybe a little shorter than that, about a proposal of some type of a camping / glamping facility. He has a lot of experience as a developer. And as you can see from the kind of the brochure, some of the broad brush topics and things that his sort of business and his model is about. And I also passed an email that he sent to me this afternoon. He recently was approved for something, and he can talk a little bit about this in Shenandoah County near Bryce Resort. Something kind of similar to this, a little bit different dynamic and location in Shenandoah. So basically what we're doing here is just getting some initial feedback. This parcel here, of course, is located on Ford Shop Road, right on the Robinson River. It's a beautiful property. I've not been out there. I'm familiar with the area. I've not been to that particular parcel. But I know this commission, and I think everyone here is kind of familiar with glamping. And it's something that I literally talk to someone every day at some level, a nod about people who are interested in Madison and this type of activity. Some of you, we remember the hearing and the film a few years ago from Cressa Ray. My only kind of concern to Ahmed, and he's been very nice to work with, and I think he's a very thorough and savvy developer that has good ideas. And just the only concern I've told him before we move forward is I want to get some initial feedback. But I've been kind of open a few times. I know I've talked to some of you on the commission, is that we sort of have a niche here of being, I think, pretty open-minded to these proposals. But I think most of them, and as I have just told Ahmed, I think most of them have been fairly small scale in nature. We're looking at anywhere from the 3 or 4 units to, in some instances, maybe a little larger. But I think that that's kind of the issues here. And he can explain more what what it would be about, is that we really do, over the size of the plus or minus 40 acres, we do have a lot of density here. And that, I've kind of told them that's my concern. So just kind of an open conversation here to talk to Ahmed a little bit and learn a little bit from him. And of course, we have the slides here, and I'll turn it over to him, and we can kind of have a back and forth here. So Ahmed, anything that you want to, well, I'll turn it back to the chairman here and let you kind of lead it. But if anytime you want to let him come in and talk a little bit, I'm sure he'll be happy to give us some more information.
Well, before we move to that segment, does anyone on the commission have a further question for Ligon?
I do.
Okay.
So I was kind of looking for, not really so much in the ordinance, but I was looking for something here that identifies glamping. I found temporary housing, and I found primitive campgrounds. Where does this fall into this?
Yeah, we used to call it rural resort, and I think that's probably a better name for it, but it'd be an event venue, even though, part of an event venue is camping, even though he's not, at this stage, it's not really an event, in the true sense, it's not an event venue. It's really, he's just sort of looking to utilize the camping, glamping portion of what is a special use in A1. So that's the way I would interpret
where
it.
does this fall into? Where does this fall?
I say a special use for an event venue,
Event venue.
but not, again, he's not really, if we get to the point where he applies for a special use, I think that he would probably happily remove sort of the event portion of it. He's really just looking to utilize the glamping well, that's what he's looking to utilize, and that is allowable as an event venue use. I mean, there could be some events there, some small scale events, but again, he's really just looking for the rustic glamping, camping type experience.
Yeah, Ligon, I'm glad Mike brought that up because that's a point I've been trying to make ever since the first presentation that he brought to us. The term event, the event venue doesn't require that the applicant do all of these things.
That's right.
It simply is an umbrella so that he's talking about glamping, which is in the event venue. He's talking about a restaurant, lodge, whatever, event venue. The fact that he doesn't plan on, hopefully, having a 500-person concert doesn't mean that the event venue is not the appropriate special use application. That's why I've been repeatedly asking why he seems to be resistant to calling it that.
Yeah, I mean, I think because explicitly he's not really looking, and that's going back a couple of years ago. Not a big deal, but I we changed that event venue. Me personally, and I've been here for a few years now. I sort of like the rural resort as a better term. Some people had a problem with the word resort. Now we're kind of here. We kind of have a little problem with the word event. So regardless, I think you said it perfectly, Steve.
So going forward, I suggest that we simply say this is a special use application for event venue. And that glamping is right now his primary.
That's correct.
Yeah. I'm also, as you mentioned, very concerned about the density of 70 tents on less than 40 acres. So, all right. Any other comments or questions from the Planning Commission?
Yeah, Lincoln, would you explain this? I haven't counted the number of little sites, but would you explain?
Right. So right off Fort Shop, you have an entrance, and if you look at maybe if the actual hard copy in your packet, you can see that showing a parking area right there on Ford Shop. And then you would have those black lines sort of kind of follow the contours of the property. That would be, a graded, graveled road, maybe not much similar than many of the rural roads / private drives in the county. And then along that, you would see the glamping sites, the campsites. And again, Ahmed can be a little more specific as far as what each specific site would look like, but it's very similar to the proposal that at least my interpretation is what we saw from, sort of right there on Duet Road last year. Only had 4, but you have a platform. You'd have some sort of a tent structure, and he also intends to have a bathroom, quote unquote facilities in each tent. So, as far as the structure, that's something that can come if we get to the special use phase. Talk to the building official and get more details on that. But so that would be the tent, and then you can see it kind of meanders through the property, follows the ridges and the contours, and then terminates, and you'd come back out. And we've had an initial conversation and had a meeting last week with the emergency services to talk about access. And again, we have an idea, and I think that talks with Gavin and Brian Gordon, and I think there's an understanding of how if there is an emergency there, that it can be accessed, and it really could be accessed by those quote unquote roads that are that are proposed.
What is the stuff on the left as you come in? It looks like there are a series of buildings there and a roundabout or something.
Right. So, right in this area, you have the parking area. And again, this is very conceptual at this point. So you have parking area here. You have looks like a lodge. I'm sorry, lodge would be right in this area. It's just hard to see it to kind of look at the
Yeah.
your hard copy, and then you have the glamping, again that follow this road here, and we do have we're showing 70 units on this, so.
And they can,
I'm sorry, Mick, you say it again?
no, I would be happy to walk you
Yeah.
through the site plan.
Right, we can get to that, but just whenever they're done with me.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, thank you.
if okay. I don't know if y'all familiar. I mean, Ford Shops Road feeds off Beantown, coming off 15. You're familiar with the Robinson River, so how that's oriented, you can see the river and that kind of red dark line going up there is the road. So you go from an agriculture area, just beyond that, about a half mile, you start into the density. And then it feeds on down, Ford Shop turns into meander. So that's density. The entrance is actually, it's the dark line. It looks like it doesn't touch the road there, but that's where you would actually come in. There's a circle, and that's your drop-off point. So the black delineation you see is the pathways or cartways or whatever we're going to call it to each of the campsites. The little lines, I know it's hard to see, the little lines that look like parking lines, that is for each of your campsites. And there's a couple of drain fields being proposed, but I've just wanted to basically give you some orientation of where it's at, and the only access shown on that drawing is that drop-off point as you come in.
Where's the parking?
Right here.
Your parking, it's
Right.
Oh, I thought those were buildings. That's the parking area.
There are two buildings.
Is this property part of the old Goodall farm? or
I'm not
APM
sure about the
farm?
good. I'm not sure about the Goodall farm. I know the Penhollers family is the current owners, and Amid can speak to this. I believe he's the potential buyer. So obviously the concept of this may hinge on purchasing, but it is within the Penholler family.
The Goodall farm is further north and on this side of the river.
I guess from my perspective, the philosophical question is, what are the county's interests with respect to this? This is a situation. I lived in DC right in town for 50 years. It's far more dense than the dense community in which I live. And I question why anybody would want to do this, but then I question if somebody wants to put their money in this, should we care? How do you
Well,
respond to
it's a
that?
land use change first and foremost. So that's, the obvious that it requires to go through Plan Commission. Right. For philosophically, it's dense, and maybe to a certain degree, it sort of looks like you would leave the suburbs and come out to a suburban camping site. But Ahmed knows the market, and he's done a lot of research and feels like this is something that can be successful. There's always the economic development, tourism that's important to the county. I just my observations is, and when I talk to people and have these initial conversations with people, I want people to feel like they can come bring their ideas here, whether maybe I think it's a good idea or not. I want them to be able to do that, but I'm quick to point out that I believe the orientation of the county and the Plan Commission and the board, and or probably for things are a little lower impact and probably just generally smaller in scale. But it doesn't mean that people, that maybe there's something, that something with this size couldn't work. But I do think it's challenging when you do have this.
If this is a parking lot here, and they're gonna park here, and the sites are out through, like you say, Are there gonna be like golf cart transportations to the sites? We know that if we're gonna park there, people are not gonna drive to them. And I surely would think that somebody's not gonna walk all the way to that last campsite.
Right. And I mean, I can talk to this when he, but my understanding is that there would be some, golf carts, sort of those type of off-road vehicles that would be at the lodge. It would shuttle people back and forth as needed.
Yes.
So each one of these little glamping sites, is it for 2 people?
That's
4
correct.
people, 6
I'm
people?
pretty sure it's 2, but yep.
Yeah, Faye?
Yes, one thing, if I know where this is very well, and also it's a good spot for coming off of Oak Park Road, or, you can come from a variety of places, because I travel those roads all the time. I mean, it's a great spot to feel like you're getting away from the congestion of a city, and so I know the sites look really, really close, but I've been camping a few times with great big campers that cost a whole lot more money than my car does. And they're very close. They're very close in a lot of those places. I mean, you're almost at your neighbor, so you bring your own, screen or whatever. I'm sure that will be taken into consideration if this developer is putting these close together, that you won't feel like you're eating your neighbor's food while you're, at your site. I mean, I don't think if we haven't been to one of these places, we can possibly conceive of what it might look like. I know my eyes were quite opened by taking an $80,000 camper to a place that I couldn't barely step outside without, So it's interesting how these work, but people pay for it and they want it, and they want to come out where it's a beautiful spot. And Robinson River, unless it's flooding, is a beautiful river. Beautiful river. And it's really, really nice.
Yeah, that was my impression when I saw this drilling. It looks like an RV park. Yeah.
Well, but he's not going to build something. No one would build something, I wouldn't think, that they are not going to make money at what they're doing and making it so that it is appealing to people that are going to be coming out wanting to rent these things. And as far as the impact on the county, as far as money, Tracy, oh my goodness, lots and lots and lots of all kinds of funds come in through this. And it's not. So anyway,
I've seen where they've got a designated drain field, but I don't see anything on this potential site plan for water. You're talking about a great demand of water. Good point. It'll be easier to get rid of the waste than it is going to be to find enough water. Got a whole river, Danny.
and we're trying to keep it clean.
Not advised to drink from that.
I think Orange would be upset with you.
No, it'd be coming from Madison down.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would take it before it gets there.
Any other questions from
Right, it would take away from that. You're right.
the planning commission? Yes, Sean.
Chairman, just brief reference, our neighbors to the south have not quite a comparable, but they have a 144 unit site that I believe is still special use permit stage. It's called Sojourner Landing. You may want to take a look at that and get some insights as to what this may, what may be envisioned here, because I think Ms. Oots is right. We're seeing more and more of these types of things. So there must be some sort of market for it. Question becomes, how much density,
Right.
everybody wants to move to the country. I think there's a used called McLean, Virginia. People who wanted to get out of DC and finally get into a rural area. I'm not sure it worked.
It tends to follow them, yes. All right, any other?
No offense to
The only other observation I would make, Liggett, is that you get all these people in these glamping facilities, and they're going to want some entertainment. These are city people, that presumably they're going to say no.
here we are, what do we do?
All right. Any other comments? Okay, we have the
Yeah.
representative.
Yeah,
from-
Ahmed, do you want to kind of give a few thoughts here? And
Yeah, I would have to say that. Is there a possibility to share a screen?
we'll talk to our technical advisor here. He might be able to help you out.
If it's not too complicated.
You the presenter, and you can share your screen from GoToMeeting that way.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes, sir, we can see it. Give me just a second. I will enlarge. And there we go.
Okay. Hey. So just to give you an idea why we're speaking American County. This is our second project in the area. I'm involved in other projects in Lake Placid, upstate New York, also Catskills, New York, Yosemite, California, and we think there's a lot of potential in this area, unrealized potential. And the reason I say that is that we were the first to, not the first actually, but we're probably more advanced than other special use permits in terms of glamping. We're moving ahead with our project in Shenandoah County. We got an approval there last year. We did a great job with the community. We even got letters of support, which was unheard of in Shenandoah County, at least, that we get letters of support, not supporting our projects from the community. Getaway right now is working with us to develop the property. They have, there's another successful outpost in Greene County for Getaway. So I think DC is underserved. DC is a very big market. Shenandoah is a national park, gets more than, I think, 1.2 million visitors a year. Madison County has a lot of tourism attractions, I would say primarily the wine country. So we think the target market, and that's primarily the DC market, secondary, I'd say Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and other metropolitan cities, including Richmond, are underserved markets when it comes to glamping, which has skyrocketed in the past 3 years. 90% occupancy rates across the nation. Average daily rates are $350 to $400 a night for these luxury tents. I think there's a lot of potential. Again, we're the ones who will be taking the financial risk, but I think Madison County is very, very promising. Zooming in on the property itself, I think it's a very special property. We have a river, and that's very unique. We can create great experiences around the river without, I know we wouldn't be building structures close to the river because of the flood zone, but pathways, view sheds. Also, the property has boulders on it. It has beautiful rolling hills, amazing views of the mountains. It gives you this rural look and feel. So we believe it is very promising. I know Ligon has stressed on the density aspect of the project, the fact that it's 70 tents. And I know Madison has this rural character and it wants to maintain this character. Yet I think our strategy as developers, our principles are very much aligned with that. So though it is 70 tents in count, the way we develop our strategy, and I would like to share with you, focus on that specifically in this conversation. So that is just before I move to our strategy in terms of development. That is a picture from the site of the Robinson River, as you see. Also, the next slide shows the mountains from the property itself. It's amazing. I would believe in fall and spring, it would be even more attractive, beautiful area. And the reason we put this property under contract and talked to the owners, by the way, the owners, yes, you're right, they own quite an amount of land around this property too. So when we shared with them, and they're very sentimental, very attached to the land, when we shared our vision, they were very much excited to entertain selling it to us because they believe we add to this property. if I am to share with you our development strategy, and I think it's very much aligned with the rural character of Madison County, it is what we call B, which is Blue River Retreats. The name of our shop is equals C, which is community, plus 3E, which is environment, elegance, and economy. And if I may just share with you that strategy, just go in more detail about the strategy. In terms of community, we work very closely with the community, and we have proven success in the Shenandoah project, especially with the budding neighbors who are going to be mostly impacted by the project. We do add voluntary conditions on the special use permit to meet their needs. That includes quiet times, indirect lighting systems, centralized parking, so we don't have the guests roaming the property with their vehicles, with their cars. There is a designated area for them to park the car. Then they are, we take them to their tents with electric golf carts, unless they want to walk. And that's why the design of the property is done in a way where once you enter the property and you check in through the lodge, and I can give you an idea what's in the lodge later on, but you check in, you park your car, and then a staff member would take you with a luggage, with a cart equipped to carry luggage to your tent, and onwards you would mostly be walking unless you need a cart to move around. In that case, we would pick you up. So no motor vehicles roaming the property. We also do not have public events or concerts, and if there is a need for a wedding, the criteria is you have to reserve the whole property, the whole property to have a wedding on it. We don't just, we don't have these day events on the property. No walk-ins for the restaurant. It's primarily servicing our guests. That's about it. And our on-site activities are very in tune with nature. It's like stargazing, bird watching, meditation. So our guest basically wants to escape DC, the hustle and bustle of New York City or Philadelphia, and come enjoy, unplug and unwind. So they're not into late night partying, loud music. And therefore, I think we're very much in tune in terms of our concept and the rural character of Madison County, although it is 70. So I think 70 is a large number, but I also think the way we impact the environment and the community should be factored in. I also want to stress out on the environment. We're very adaptive in our development approach. We're very light on the land. Our tents are on platforms. The platforms have minimum invasion, or like the foundations are very, very shallow. We don't go dig deep. The way we work with design our circulation system, meaning the roadways and the trace systems, the wide roads that serve our like vehicles and the full-fledged fire truck, and yes, we did have a conversation with the fire department, are all right in the first, I'd say, 1/3 of the property, right next to the door. And once you go inside the property, it's all 9-foot gravel roads, primarily consumed or used by golf carts. Or maybe it would carry, no, maybe we will make sure it's designed to carry a brush truck in case of an emergency. We also have, we usually plan to have an emergency response plan, and our staff would be trained on it. And we will have a designated EMS golf cart designed for such emergencies, in case there's an emergency, and we would be acting as the first responders. So that's why we work on having very narrow 9-foot trails throughout the property, and these are the ones that connect to the tents. When we design our circulation system, we go with the contours and the topography of the land. That way we minimize grading on the property, so we don't damage the land. The way we design, when it comes to traffic also, I want to stress on something related to traffic, because again, 70 tents means quite a few cars checking in and checking out every day. But observing from experience, we have very limited traffic, usually based on traffic studies that we did elsewhere, our guests would check in usually at the peak period is 1 p.m. and it's usually around 7 cars entering, 11 exiting during that period. Also checking out around or coming in from their, from their daily trips around 5 p.m. And it's around 15 entering, 8 exiting based on the density of 70 units. And our guests usually like have breakfast in the morning in the lodge. They don't stay in the lodge. They usually take their car, either go hiking, drive the skyline, go to a winery, enjoy some local restaurant. Then they come back in the evening, have lunch, sit around the fire pit, have a drink or two, and then go to sleep. Our quiet time is usually around 10 or 11 p.m. So there are no multiple trips back and forth on the property, and that minimizes the load on the road. I did talk to Willis in VDOT, and he did say the site distance and the width of the road allow. We might need to do a commercial entrance, but other than that, the bus site distance, the way the road is designed and its width will allow this kind of outpost or this kind of project on the property. In terms of elegance, we really harmonize our design to beautifully blend with the existing natural elements. This property has amazing topography, amazing views, boulders, has a river. It doesn't have much vegetation on it, but we also add to that by we're trying to augment the charm of the land with our architecture and landscape design. I'm very confident that this outpost will be a landmark in Madison County, like the ones that are being developed across the nation. It is a booming industry. There's so much demand for it. Usually with this kind of project, we'll be investing $15 million, give or take, of course, depending on many unknowns at this point, like the septic systems, the wells, and so forth. But it would be a $15 million investment for these 70 tents. In terms of economy, the reason we want 70 tents is this kind of hospitality requires numbers. The amount of infrastructure and roads and common facilities require more daily rentals. If we go below that, usually it's a very challenging project from a financial standpoint. And I think, I believe you as the Planning Commission do want successful projects. I don't think you want us to be wasting your time with a project that maybe gets the special use permit but never materializes because no one wants to give us money for it, whether it's equity or debt. I also think that you want us to succeed. You don't want us to build a property and then abandon it in a couple of years and just leave the property, abandoned. And basically, even the local economy doesn't benefit from that. We very much focus on what we call the backward linkage in the economy. We source locally. We very much focus on hiring locals. Probably we'll be hiring around 40 employees between part-timers and full-timers. We try to, source from surrounding universities for internships. And also, of course, the tax money is also quite significant. So having said so, if I have, do I have like 5 more minutes? Or am I taking too long?
No, you're doing great. I think one question that we just had, would this be year round, do you anticipate, or just kind of being a March through November kind of thing? How do you anticipate that?
It is a March through November kind of project. I mean, seasonality makes a difference. Given the type of accommodations that we have, the tents, they are insulated tents. There is climate control on each and every tent. There's an ensuite bathroom and everything. Yet there's so much you can do to control climate in the winter. Plus, demand in this area really drops in the winter time. So it is a seasonal business. We try to extend the season as much as possible, but I'd say November would be. This is when we close and then reopen in March or April, probably March.
Does anyone on the Planning Commission have a question?
How many people are allowed per tent?
I'm sorry.
How many people are allowed per tent?
So it ranges between, the tent sizes range between 450 square feet to 600 square feet. So they range between 2 to 4 individuals per tent. That's the range.
So you're anticipating different sizes of tents for the glamping? Because your drawing shows all the same.
Yeah, different sizes of tents. So it range between 450 to 600 square feet.
Any other questions?
I have one for Tracy.
Yeah.
We will collect transit occupancy tax off of this?
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Well, it was just asking if, of course, transient occupancy taxes would be, that would be sort of the main, from the county revenue would be the transient, monthly transient occupancy tax.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions?
Sort of from my experience, I think Ahmed brings up a good point. He does have a lot of experience with this, and he's got a proven track record. And my intent here was to get this just so could get some feedback. And I know it's not a vote, but it's just one of these things that's a non-starter. I think a lot of that comes back to the feedback in the community. And maybe one of the things, maybe from the lesson we might have learned a few years ago is maybe if Ahmed was interested in this, doesn't have to be a planning commission thing, but I would be more than happy to facilitate some sort of a community meeting, get that, just to put it out and to say, look, one afternoon, if you want to come and talk to Ahmed and his folks and sit down and talk in an informal way, that might be another step in this process, and to get an idea of what the folks in that neighborhood would think before we even go to a public hearing. I mean, would that be something, just again, I'm just sort of thinking here, would that be something that maybe could be useful? And if planning commission members want to come, obviously they can come, but that might at least give us an idea of what sort of concerns and quote unquote pushback we might get from folks in that area.
Yeah, that's maybe head off one of these 1 a.m. meetings. And,
So, I can talk to Ahmed a little bit. Maybe that might be another step that we could do here the next month or so before maybe we get a formal application, if that's something that, we think it's a good idea. I think it. Okay.
Absolutely. Maybe that's something I think.
Why would we not do that?
Yeah. I mean, it's not a public hearing. We're just going to say, just meet and
Maybe
greet.
that's something
Let's,
Tracy could handle.
right. Exactly. Right. Ahmed, would that sound like something that maybe could be a step we could take here next 30 to 45 days?
I would love to. I mean, that's exactly our strategy. I mean, if you look at the slide right now, these are actual pictures of our meetings that we had with the community in Birdhaven in Shenandoah, and that's the property in the back, this wooded property. It was in winter. We had multiple meetings with them. We had a lot of conversations, and we did adapt the project to their needs, having natural screens, evergreens between us and the neighbors, way before the setback, way more than the setbacks. We did a lot of work regarding forest conservation and fire safety, hunting preservations, because mostly they were hunters. They were very much concerned because we were surrounded by the national forest, and we wanted to make sure that we're not hurting their hobbies and their interest in the area. So definitely this is something we're very much interested in, and honestly, we wouldn't move forward with the projects if we don't get the buy-in from the community.
okay, any other questions from the planning commission?
Okay, I'll work and keep everybody in the loop. I'll setting that up here, sometime in a month or so.
All right, in that case, is there any public comment? Okay, no public comment at this point. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll be in touch. I bet. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay, now all the exciting things are done with. Under whole business, Peter, would you give us a quick rundown on your short-term rental unit policy that your committee's been working on?
Yeah, the document we have before us is the same document we discussed the last workshop. We had a good discussion about it. There were many comments. Following that workshop, I asked Steve and Ligon and members of the Business and Industry Committee for comments. I did get a comment from Ligon, which is reflected in the materials, in which he suggests deleting the provision stating registered with building and zoning department. There was some negative reaction to that provision. I obviously, if we're talking about 2 or more short-term lodging units, it's got to be registered with the building and zoning department because it requires a special use permit. But if the price of getting this enacted, which I think is a good idea, it was Ligon's idea, is deleting that provision, then I would support it. We also talked at the last workshop about the second paragraph, which starts one such short-term lodging unit, et cetera, et cetera. And I think there was some comment that really was unnecessary, that in the various sections, whether it be conservation or agriculture or whatever, we could state what's upright and what isn't. You could say in the conservation, for example, or agriculture, one short-term lodging unit is of right, and you could say in the special uses, 2 or more short-term lodging units require a special use permit. My feeling is that because there might be some confusion, I would do that. I would add those 2 provisions, but I would keep the second paragraph, but I would combine it with the first paragraph. So we just have one paragraph. And so if you go to the definition, you see an explanation that might answer questions that people would have. But apart from that, I'm pretty comfortable with it. I invite members of the committee first to make any comments, or Steve, you've been involved in this as well.
Well, first, let's see if we have any comments or questions from the committee, from the commission.
From the committee first.
Okay, from the committee
Start with
first, okay.
Committee and then from the commission.
Committee members?
Any questions? James, Mike? Okay. Danny,
I do have one quick question.
do you have?
Yep.
Okay.
This is touching on the registering with the building and zoning. I can understand not registering with building and zoning, provided that there is some official registration process with the commissioner. It implies here that it's very unofficial. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, the commissioner creates an account with each one to pay the transient occupancy tax. So there's an account, an open account that each one has. Call it registering. I mean, so you basically you're registered once you start paying the transit occupancy taxes. And I know Brian, he goes on these websites and makes sure that, whether it's VRBO and
I'm suggesting that rather than to require him to go hunting for them, that we put that in here in the definition so that any special use permit applicant understands that it's their responsibility to contact the commissioner, tell him that they're doing this, so that he now doesn't have to go hunting all over the websites for him to do it. I mean,
think that's a good suggestion.
Yeah. Otherwise, I mean, it's a question of fairness. You can't say, all right, you volunteered, you told me that you're doing this, so we're going to take your tax money or collect the tax money. But somebody who ignores it,
no, he'll contact them if they're doing it.
you have to hunt them down to do it, though.
Right.
So you're putting
Sometimes.
a penalty on the people that do it voluntarily. I think that should be eliminated. That make it part of the definition. That and I agree. If it's already being done through the Commissioner of Revenue, that's the appropriate place to say it has to be done. Yeah, Mike, did you have?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask why, and I don't mind going that direction, what you just said, but why did we change our minds on registering with the building and zoning?
We haven't changed our collective minds.
Well, I mean,
We're exploring.
I am not in favor of taking that out.
Well,
Okay, I'm personally.
I mean, they already have an account with the Commissioner of Revenue. There's, we know where they are. Commissioner has all that information. If you have more than one, you've got to get a special use permit. I just kind of feel like we just keep handing people's forms, and once you, fill a form out, so there's nothing I'm going to really do with it other than say, okay,
Well, it would become part of the special use permit
Right, and if you get
application,
right,
which would be automatically
yeah,
forwarded. Then.
if you're doing more than one, then we're
Yes,
going to,
yeah.
right. Then we're going to know who you are and have the special use permit, and I'm going to send you acknowledgement that you're a
So we're
special use
just
permit.
talking about one.
The ones,
And
right.
the question is, should notice be given to the building and zoning office, or should notice be given to the commissioners? Or should we count on people acting on their own accord? I would give notice to the building and zoning office on all of these, and they can just report it to the commissioner. Because I think it's important for you and your office, Ligon, to know what's going on with regard to these short-term rentals.
Brian
Mike,
does have
Mike.
a business.
What's that?
He does have a new business registration. He doesn't have to.
Oh, they do have they do register a business license, but they don't have to pay a fee or anything like that with it. Right. Okay. Okay. Well, no, it's good. Good. Well, I could just ask them, can you give me we keep a list of them. I mean, we only will get involved if you're going to have two on a lot,
Yeah, well, with the special use application. Well, it still leaves the question of, do we want to formally put it in the definition as it is now? And I think, Peter's pretty adamant. I think I agree with him that it needs to be in there somehow. Yes, question, Pete.
Yeah, so let me make sure I understand correctly. The little woman who lives out here, she had a basement and her husband passed away, and she had a carpenter come in and created 2 apartments. Now she's got to get a special use.
We're just talking about short-term
That's a
rentals
short-term
here,
rental.
not
Less
an
than 30
apartment.
days. Less than 30 days.
I think the typical situation, and you brought this up the last time, Pete, would be that widow would want a long-term rental, not a series of short-term rentals that she'd have to clean the house for every week or two. But
Well, since our definition is based on the short-term rental unit, if she does too many apartments in her house basement, would that be
No,
one unit?
Well, if she has an apartment in her basement and she didn't get a building permit and do the
Yeah.
right thing, she's got problems. But people do those things kind of informally. It's, if it's family member that they're renting to or something like that, then we just kind of consider it. But if she's actually putting a for rent sign, then there's some issues that could come up. I mean, look, people do it, but if we're made aware of it, I mean, worst case scenario, they rent their basement out, don't have proper egress out of it, and there's a fire and they can't get out, and that did happen not long ago. So, creating another dwelling unit in your house without going through the proper, building, don't forget it, but zoning aside, if you do that, you can be creating some issues for yourself.
Yes, right.
Yeah, I was going to ask that question about the definition and the fact that that we're considering this a separate unit for the most part, and piggybacking on Pete's a little bit, the fact that it's a room and maybe it's just one room or a mother-in-law suite that somebody has created, and then things change, and you have a really nice place for someone to stay in, but they don't want it full with long-term rental. That is a huge problem. Believe me. Or you have an extra apartment that maybe you had at one time and now you want just to rent it out every weekend, or you want to rent it out a certain time of the year or whatever, which you would have. And if you advertise, we're not talking about any advertisement on Airbnb or BROB or anything. But where does that, I mean, that's part of a structure, an existing structure like a home. I know when I used to go to Pennsylvania, we used to stay in what were called those kinds of things, way back. It was actually a bedroom in a woman's house.
They call them boarding houses, kind of.
Like that. And, that's what it was. I mean, people came and she had her rooms open, and it was,
Right.
she provided a little bit of breakfast, and yeah, almost. That was years ago. But I mean, I think this is sort of the same thing. I mean, I realize people might want their own single dwelling, but not everybody has that. And I know people that are doing that now. Now, I'm not saying they're not paying their taxes. I'm just saying I know they do that now, just like I know their rentals.
Yeah, the far majority of them, as far as the short-term rentals, again, it's like, we just use Airbnb as a broad term. I think the far majority of them are separate.
So are we not going to address the others? I don't care about what they are or aren't, but we have a lot of people here who have existing dwellings. I mean, do we need to even? I don't know.
If someone is in an existing dwelling and renting a room out, then they still would fall under this.
Like an Airbnb.
Right. They would still fall under this provision, in my humble opinion, and they would still be responsible for transit occupancy tax.
Right.
If they expand outside that house.
So long as we're all on the same page.
Once it's a second unit, then.
Right. Maybe we ought to reword it so it's not just a separate unit. It's any unit that you, I don't know. I haven't thought about it till, I thought about it before, and now we're at the point where we.
So, what are you suggesting?
I don't know. I don't know. I haven't thought enough about the wording, but I just know there are people that have mother-in-law suites. There are people that have a second part of their house that they built for maybe an older person, and now they're deceased, and they have that there available to rent out, and figured out that's a good way to have an income. And as far as whether or not we want to do short-term versus, that's not up to us to decide. They want to clean that room every week or every day, or that's up to them, and we don't want to, and they make a whole lot more money.
But as relates to
I don't know.
Proposal,
do we want it? This sounds like it's an individual accessory structure.
I would still focus just on what we have here. I think this
and not worry about that.
Okay. I wouldn't put a lot of.
If that's what we want to do, that's fine. I just.
Just a point of reference, Mr. Chairman, interject. Mr. Wheaton shared with me, our ordinance is already called for the transient occupancy tax not to apply on any leasing that is for more than 30 days.
I'm not talking about,
I understand, but my point is our scheme already exempts those properties that are longer term rental where people had something.
Right, and that I understand. I was just thinking about this, the Airbnb thing where you don't stay but overnight or 2 nights.
Initially, in terms of registration, I think indicated that this type of registration requirement, I think that will idea is to make sure that people are not penalized for being diligent.
Right, I agree.
If you've got an ordinance that requires that diligence, I think it makes
Yeah. Well, I think if we have a problem, eventually we'll know about it, and that's when we'll take care of it.
Yeah, I think what Peter's doing here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we're not intending to deal with the Airbnbs and that type of thing for the one room that's being rented in somebody's house that they live in.
And again, if it, reaches the 30-day threshold.
Right.
It's no longer subject to the.
Right.
And that was my point.
Right.
Yeah, we're looking at, again, correct me if I'm wrong, a single-family house, which is maybe not the primary residence or does not have somebody living there full-time, or a cabin or an accessory structure or a yurt or a glamping site or something, any of those things.
That's the way this is written.
Yeah.
I know, I realize it's not in any one
So
service.
in the committee's discussion, if I understood it correctly, the Airbnb was, I don't know, kind of beyond the scope of what we could deal with. I mean, it's that horse is out of the barn. It has been for a long time. So we have kind of specific things that we were looking at here. And well, we just had one there that on the piece of property on Little Ford Road. Yeah. They're not planning on living in that house. They're planning on using the house and the accessory structure and the cabin or whatever as short-term rental units over and over.
Let me ask Megan a question. How do you deal with Airbnbs, et cetera?
So again, if it's a single Airbnb, I really mean short-term rental. So just when we say Airbnb, kind of like saying Xerox, it's, whether it's whatever platform you may use to rent that unit less than 30 days. We didn't really have a formal policy. So, and again, it kind of depends on where you go. Some don't do anything. Some have to get a special use permit. I have just been sort of taking the approach if it's just one short-term rental on a single parcel, then we're just considering that by right. I talked to.
And that would cover your Airbnb.
Sure. Any platform you may want to use, whether it's right.
Besides having to register either with your office or
with you,
Commissioner of Revenue.
Right. And I tell them you've got to pay the.
That would be.
Right. And I tell them you need to pay transit ox tax, call Commissioner of Revenue. As Tracy pointed out, you've got to get a business license. You have to pay any fees associated with, but you have to register business license. And then once a month, you submit 5%, whatever your sales are, times it by 5%, and you submit that. You always submit a month. You pay it a month behind. So whatever, in March, you pay February's.
Yeah.
So
To
just once a month.
Pete's and Faye's questions, though, that would not be an Airbnb, really. That's somebody simply renting a room or a mother-in-law's suite or something.
Sure, that's
in
not
their
short
home.
term. That nothing changes.
And does that require a special use permit?
No,
No.
that's a right.
Right.
That's the one. But if you go to two, then you
Well,
need a special use permit.
See, that doesn't really quite fit our definition the way we have it. An Airbnb, yes, because typically the owner is not there when it's being rented. Is that correct? It's not correct? Okay.
That's not correct.
Okay.
Lincoln, let me ask another question. When we say short-term lodging unit refers to a single-family house, dwelling, cabin, et cetera, I wonder if we should say single-family house or portion thereof.
I think that's
Okay.
that'll cover everything.
And then basically, are we
John,
kind
you
of
got
in,
this one.
in agreement now that we're talking about registering in some fashion with the Commissioner of Revenue rather than with Building and Zoning?
I'm gonna bring up just the same thing I did last time. I know of a local roofing company that put some gutters on a treehouse recently. I'm not gonna say who, but the treehouse may have had a building permit. I'm not thinking it probably didn't by the appearance of it. Beautiful, but a prime example of what could and possibly, I'm not gonna say is or isn't, being used as a Airbnb advertised online.
That's an accessory
If
structure.
it's an
isn't it?
accessory, it falls under the accessory
It would-
structure.
it-
To me, if the building has had a permit, even if it was 80 years ago, or if it was exempt, well, I'm not going to go that. Never mind. Let me back up. If it had a building permit, no problem. Nobody's got to look at that. But there's some beautiful barns out there. Somebody from the city would love to rent. There's, tree houses, all such. I think they need to be aware of it. Somebody needs to be just making sure that there's not a serious safety issue.
I think Jamie would tell you in order to occupy it and stay overnight, it has to have a certificate of occupancy and, a shed or a piece. I mean, there've been examples of short-term rentals of people renting out, yeah, I mean, right. So I don't think we have that going on in Madison.
Well, Nathan, I think the best way to deal with your concern is that the notice goes to the Building and Zoning Office, not to the Commissioner of Revenue.
I mean, I think they need to be aware.
Yeah, I do
Somebody who
Yeah, and
has an
then,
understanding of building
and then
structure.
Building and Zoning will notify the Commissioner of Revenue. I think that's probably the easiest way to kill two birds with one stone.
Yeah, as a non-administrative point, but something significant. Yeah, that kind of reverses the situation.
Any other
I
comments?
didn't realize there were tree houses with gutters.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes.
may.
Yes.
And you all may have looked at it as a committee. I only ask that any definitions you consider, if you haven't looked at Madison County Ordinance number 2011-7, which you can find it under the commissioner's website or commissioner's page on our website. It's got definitions and a lot of similar things you're talking about. I'm just always concerned about consistency and making sure they're mirrors. So as you go through this, there may be definitions or things that you want to adopt or utilize. I know you're talking about registering right now, but I hear a lot about what about boarding or what about the number of days. I would just ask maybe use that if you haven't, the terms that are already listed or the definitions that are listed.
What was that?
It's Madison County Ordinance number 2011-7. You can find it under, when you go to the government, go under the elected officials portion under Commissioner of Revenue. You can pull up the transient occupancy ordinance. I'll send this link to Mr. Webb if he would like to circulate it to the PC.
Yeah,
But
that'd be great.
okay, thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Okay. Any other comments or questions right now?
That's it for me.
Okay. Some excellent input on that, I think. Okay. Faye, it's your turn. Your initial response on the 4-on-1 rule and possible implications for subdivisions.
Yes. This has ended up being, I think, as we found the other night at our meeting, the more you know, the more you read, the more you dig in, the deeper you need to go. And then it starts having tentacles because you can't solve one problem without dealing with a couple of other problems that would be created or needing to be concerned about. Let's say it that way. So we had a long talk and got a lot of definitions squared away about the difference between subdivision and boundary adjustments. And we see the need in the county as, I'm not going to say too much about that, except we see a lot of these subdivisions and or boundary adjustments coming in, subdivision coming before us, using a variety of ways to be able to have, lots and whatever. So we're not opposed to that. It's just when we start limiting private drives to 4 houses, no more than 4 on a single private drive, that's what we're looking at right now. And we were tasked with this. So with looking at it and seeing what we needed to do. First of all, I have a question. We have no regulation, do we, in the county of, we didn't see it the other night, of how many, like when you think of a subdivision, you think of one like Fray's Mill or this or that, it has X number of homes in it. We don't have any restriction on that, right? We're talking subdivision as taking a piece of land and making it into 2 pieces of land.
Right.
That's what we're talking about. Do we ever address number of homes, all the different ways we have configurations in this county? No?
The question that came up, Libby, not to interrupt you.
No.
But it was, how many houses say this is a subdivision now? If you change that number from 4 to 8, would it become a subdivision? We don't see a number anywhere that says how many houses is a subdivision.
Right, an official subdivision.
Well, I mean, I think technically a subdivision is even a single, I mean, a single lot is a subdivision. It just really kind of becomes then, what's the number, after that? Is it, I just use, Mr. Coates as an example, it's 2 lots. We know that he had, a residual plus 3 on each one. So between those 2, he has the by right ability to create an 8 lot subdivision. It happens to be side by side. So, so the subdivisions will just vary depending on the division rights of the particular property, the access.
I think, Ligon, what they're asking, and I was at the meeting, I think this is what we're trying to get at.
Yes.
When is it something like Malvern
Mm-hmm.
or the thing that
Or
Graves
Fray's
Mill?
Mill or.
And when is it something like Mr. Coates is doing?
Yeah. Well, now
8
Malvern, I do
lots.
believe, was probably created late
Yeah, I mean,
mid-60s.
There has to be some kind of a distinction between, okay, we're subdividing
A
30
by right
acres
subdivision of land versus
into
a neighbor
4
building.
lots, and that's our subdivision.
Right.
Or we're creating a subdivision with 30 houses and a road system
Right.
and a water system, and there's a distinction that has to be made
Yeah.
there. We want to know what it is.
A development.
Chairman, if I might
Yeah,
interject. I think the problem is the term subdivision
Mhm.
in everyone's mind has
Mhm.
become a planned unit development.
Right,
Mhm.
true.
Malvern
Right.
is a subdivision, what other people think.
Right.
The reality is, if I decide to give my miscreant younger sister some land to build out her final years,
That's a subdivision, yeah.
Period.
Okay.
That's the definition. Now, they're different, and my sister's not a miscreant.
Mine is, yeah.
But, and also to kind of make the point, when you're talking about these things in meetings, don't confuse the 2.
Right.
Okay.
If it's easier to talk about a planned unit development when you mean Malvern, use the term planned unit development or PUD. which a lot of people call it.
Right.
That's kind of the shorthand that I think planned is what it is.
Oh, yeah.
Right, and that's where we went.
So my point is, a subdivision is
Okay.
one line on one line. As soon
Right.
as you've done that, you are a subdivision.
Right,
Okay.
right.
And you become a developer for all intents and purposes.
And that's what we,
What you're doing is increasing the number of houses, you're increasing traffic on roads, all of those things. So don't hide the fact that you're a developer now. If you've given my sister a lot, and I'm sure she'd appreciate it.
right, and we were confused and we knew when we looked, we didn't find anything. So that's fine. I mean, we can deal with what we're looking at right now, which is the in our subdivision right now ordinance, what it says. So it's kind of easy. We had to do a 3 different things actually. First of all, if it's a brand new driveway, all right, new people subdividing, putting in a new drive, it's much easier to set standards. Now we're talking about standards for that road. And we talked a lot about that. And we have other neighbors close by who have established road standards for their private drives. And do we want to adopt that as a minimal standard up to VDOT code? Or do we want to use another standard? Or do we want to say that the private drive coming in, this is brand new now, to a new subdivision, new group of houses coming off of it, being drawn by an engineer, which would take care of all the different kinds of things, the ditches, the width, the whatever. Do we want to require that for new? We're talking about new driveways right now. We need to have some answers on that. So we need.
You already required by DEQ, any road that disturbs over what, 10,000 square feet, has to have a plan that goes in front of soil and water.
Are they all always that?
Right now they are.
Okay.
Well, if it's less than, I think you're right, I think it's
It's
10,000.
10,000 square feet. So
But it kind of, you know, and that kind of begs the question, do you want families to be able to put themselves at risk? Or do you want a uniform standard for a subdivision?
Right.
The line on the paper.
well, that's where we don't know how far we need to go. Let me just finish this and then Pete, I'll let you speak. That was one thing we talked about a lot. So we need to figure that out and see where DEQ gets involved and all that. Okay, and what they require. Designing by an engineer or whatever. Definitely we are feeling, especially with new and any, all right, then we pull up the other thing, which is not only the new driveway, but one where you are extending the driveway, which gets to be the problem. Most of the counties that I read, including our neighbors Orange and Green and whatever, do address extending the drive, which means do they need to meet the standards if you set standards, which for the road maintenance agreement. And how do you know what your road maintenance agreement is if you didn't start out somewhere along the way? What are you going to maintain to? See what I'm saying? I mean, what is your road maintenance agreement? And we can do that. That's easy enough to do. We can have samples and whatever. And I'll just, address that later. But we definitely feel that any new, I think my committee agrees, any new driveways, probably any extension driveways need to have road maintenance agreement attached to it. Recorded in the courthouse going with the plans. So that's one thing. No, that's what it is and whatever. Another thing that we need to be sure is we have a dedicated right of way or easement or something. Most of these driveways, many of these driveways are not owned by anybody. And so the developer comes in and he does his thing and creates the road and sells the lots. And he's gone. Who's the driveway belong to? Who maintains it? If you're not going to have a formal HOA or anything of that sort, which most of us may not want to be part of, nobody wants to take that responsibility. Who maintains it? What's the deal? What happens with that kind of thing? And if nobody owns the driveway, like my driveway, nobody owns it. How do you know if you own your driveway or not?
We've never had that problem.
No.
Oh.
This is terrible.
So
Lawnmower tractor with a guy on it.
I know who owns half of mine. But that's kind of the problems we had with how do we make, where do we need to go? We'll come up with something, with your guidance, I hope, with all of us together. So
That's what underscores the need to get in front of us. I don't think with any new subdivision, if there is a shared road, a shared driveway, whatever you want to call it, you better
need to tell enough people, maybe they would listen to us. So the new driveways, and if the extension, now here comes the next problem that I asked our lawyer about when I met with him, but then again, we're going to do it again because he's already thought about it when I was there. All right, what happens to the people? All right, so the driveway gets extended and we put in new standards for the extension of the driveway. But the beginning of the driveway is like it always was, full of holes, ruts, whatever. Counties around us have said that the front part of the driveway, everybody has to agree with the road maintenance agreement. And they can enforce that in some way.
I can tell you the workaround. I wrote one of these yesterday.
Good.
The guys at the back end, they pay for all of the maintenance. And economically, it makes sense for them to do that. They have better views. They're higher up on the mountain. So they're willing to do it.
So that's part of the road maintenance agreement that they're signing.
Well,
for him.
signing it because they're really that
Hmm.
So, you know, and a lot of these are economically driven decisions. That's why
Mhm.
the better approach is for the owner of the property before it's subdivided to create his regime, whatever it is. And that's why you see some of them are called road maintenance declarations as opposed to road maintenance agreements.
Okay.
Because there's only one owner, so he's declaring, he's not agreeing with himself.
Mhm.
But it is binding on all of the lots that are created as a result of that. And that's why your better HUDs have that. Because it's very difficult to get the guy who lives at the
That's right.
corner of the
That's right.
state road to agree to help a guy who lives a half mile behind. But if the developer of the planned unit development knows what he's doing, he's going to insist on it.
Right.
Otherwise, he can't sell the lot.
I'm not sure right now. I don't know if that'll happen or not. We'll have to see in our county what was going on. The thing that was mentioned too was the construction of the new home at the extension and all that, tearing up the road. And if you don't have something in place, you know, so it's something worth thinking about and deciding how we want to go with this. Now, definitely, there is no way. Are you saying if we don't extend like any of our private drives the way they are now, and no extension, that's where they are. So we're not going to require anything on that.
What's happened in neighboring counties is if you want to add additional houses, you bring the existing road to the current road standards.
Okay.
And the extension is to the current road standards. And the reason for that is it's kind of nonsensical to have.
All right.
And again, this is on some personal experience. You don't want to have to ford two creeks and then suddenly you have a nice road.
Mhm.
The idea is the road should be as accessible, you know, at the very front as it is in the very back.
Mhm.
And it's particularly illogical to have the better part of the road near the back because that's where the fewest number of houses are going to be.
So we can take care of the all new driveway. We can take care of the extension by writing it
Well, you just write that they have to bring it up to the current.
right. Okay, and that would be the
Lots of properties, you know, before you start worrying
Right,
about
there's
the
nowhere near
hardships,
this.
there are lots of subdivisions of this sort where they don't have that provision. I have taken some of the plans to adjoining counties, and they've said, well, you can do what you are asking, provided you bring the road up to a certain standard. In many cases, it's not economically feasible to do that, so the development doesn't happen. But that's a business decision for the landowner.
What standards is that?
Whatever we decide.
whatever we decide. Is it going to be up to state road standards for that kind of a road, or there are other designs out there, or are we going to say it needs to be designed by an engineer, a qualified engineer, of course, certified?
You know, what you're having to weigh at that point is where does public safety become a factor when you consider the property rights issue? You know, I would submit it's a balancing act, and that's why it's appropriate for the planning commission or the supervisors ultimately to make these determinations.
Okay, and then another thing, like I said, this kind of gets tentacles. We don't want to touch family divisions, except,
The road doesn't care if you look.
well, that's right. And also, we have a rather low years that you need to, that family member has to own the land. 3 years. Many of them are 5, some of them are 10, 3 years. And then you can do whatever with it. Am I correct? You can do whatever. You can sell it. So that means another house. So it's very potential. And a lot of people have done this. I'm sure it's around. There are 4 houses now. So but we don't have the same rules for the son or somebody who gets a lot. 3 years later, they sell it. They had it in their name for 3 years. Now they're on the lot. They're on the road. And nothing's been done with the road. Or
And again, my driving doesn't change just because I'm visiting.
so we need to address that, correct? Something about it. That's why the family thing. We're not interested in changing anything about, anything other than that part of how do we attach, what do we do with the road after that 3-year period if we aren't addressing it up front?
But the big factor in this that's kind of ending overall of it is what is the road standard? I think you are, getting in a precarious circumstance and you have a different road standard for a family subdivision.
Mhm.
So that's something, because as you pointed out, it's only a 3-year thing, and then as it evolves, people forget it was a family subdivision, and then they're gonna be back in front of this planning commission or our board of supervisors and say, well, wait a minute, why did you approve this whenever you approved something where ambulances and fire and rescue cannot get to?
Okay, so committee, anybody else want to say anything, please?
This is my opinion and my opinion only. I don't think that this board or this commission wants to set standards for roads. And the reason I say that, if I'm building up here in a muddy holler, and we've set a standard for a road, the county has, and they build the road to the standard we've set, the road's no good. Are they gonna come after us? I think that it should be an engineer designs a road, brings it in front of us, we approve it. I don't think we should have a standard for roads.
That's why the engineer came up.
And you
Yes.
could certainly do it that way. You could also impose minimum standards. I mean, that's, y'all want to make the rules.
And our soil around here
A
is,
hybrid of the two that says, because there are some places where the road may not do what it needs, and no offense to the engineering profession, there are incompetent engineers.
well, yeah.
And that's.
But if we look at it and see that, when they bring the drawings and see that, wait a minute, there's a swamp here, and you were recommending 4 inches of stone.
But I've got a PE stamp, so I know more than you do.
But that's okay, he put a PE stamp, so his PE stamp has to stand good for it if it fails. Correct?
That's
Yes.
the way to look at it. Yes, that's one reason to do it. Anybody else on the committee before? Okay, go ahead.
Is your
I mean,
question, Mike?
Steve, you go ahead. Yes.
So
Yeah.
is this gonna be permitted? If we do something like this, is this gonna be permitted and upheld by somebody that, if say an engineer designs this road, are they gonna, is the individual gonna get a permit to do this and gonna be signed off?
What do
by
they
the
get? I
county?
don't know.
Who signs off on this?
That's more legal.
It looks at me. So, so yeah, I think with the road,
I mean,
and
with a certain timeframe is on that too. So
and
if you go to do this 3-year thing from the family, it's got to be accomplished in a certain timeframe, or it never gets done. That's it.
yeah, I think on the road, if you look at the code, it does. We do have a definition for private road subdivision, and maybe Pete alluded to it. I think there are a lot of different standards for roads. You can do chip and tar, you can do curb and gutter, you can do so it's possible to depending on where it is and topography, and if is it a raw piece of land, is there already some lots on it? I mean, it could be a situation where someone could come and present, hey, this is our maintenance agreement and this is a standard we want to build this subdivision to. We're going to gravel, we're going to use this type of gravel, and that could be part of the subdivision if the intent is to expand the ability to subdivide on private roads, is to kind of get, to allow the ability to go beyond the 4 in 1. Because as the code says now, private road, once you have more than 4, you've got to build it to the state standard, even though we have a very nice definition about private road subdivision. We do. And I think, as Faye said, you looked at other counties, and in my experience working in Rockingham and being familiar with Page, it varies from place to place. It really does. But almost universally, a lot of people who develop properties, the rub a lot of times comes if you say, okay, once you get to X number of lots, you've then got to make it a state road. That's where it just becomes financially burdensome. But hey, we've got a lot of private road subdivisions in this county that seem to work fine, and Malvern, and well maintained.
But they have an HOA, and they
Right.
require a monthly fee or whatever they pay, and they take care of it. And that's not exactly what we're looking at. We're not looking at anything, I don't think, are we? Committee is not really looking at anything that's talking about a private, like my phrase meal near me or whatever. I mean,
Not a planned development.
not a
We're
planned
looking at
development, nothing
standard.
like that. We're not looking at. So did I hear you say that if there's more than 4 houses on a driveway, they have to be bring it up to state standard. We don't even allow more than 4 at this point.
And we've got a lot that have more than 4.
We have a lot of lots that have more than
Right,
4.
Right, and some of them probably lots that were created. But when, when folks come into the office and looking at subdividing, that's the first thing we look at is how many lots are on that private road. And if you've got more than 4, you just tell them you can't subdivide.
Well, that's it. And that's what we're trying to fix right now.
Right.
That's why we're looking at this. How
So,
can we do something?
I mean,
Plus, we want to have this road maintenance agreement in place.
I mean,
Certainly.
I'm sorry, I'm not
No.
trying to
We
be
need
on
all the
camera.
help we can get.
So under 4-8-1, which is your private road ordinances, a couple of things I want to point it out. Many of you probably already know. And there's a couple of things cited there. So a private road shall connect to a public road. Well, we know that because you got to get out some
Yeah,
way, or to a former county road. But and shall have a minimum, so it says shall, that's a legal word, minimum right of way width of 50 feet as required by VDOT. And then it says, however, a private road does not have to meet any other requirement. So the only requirement that references the VDOT, it has to be 50 feet. Then it goes on, the maintenance and improvement of a private road shall be the mutual obligation of the landowners in the subdivision. So shall be mutual obligation. I don't know if you want to change that where it shall be. Also, to get to who's looking at this or how do you track this, the plat of the lot served by any private road shall have the following statement. So this has to be on the plat that's recorded in the clerk's office. Any further subdivision of the tract of land or any further extension of the private road shall hereon is subject to the review by the planning commission and the board of supervisors. So I get it. Your 4 lots are already there, but these plats are supposed to be stamped indicating this. So next time you go to review it, it's how you catch it, how you regulate it. So the only VDOT requirement is the 50-foot right of way. But it does say shall mutual obligation. I don't know if you want to strengthen that to say shall be required to have a road maintenance agreement, but that's the current language.
That wasn't exactly what we were tasked to look at, I didn't think. I mean, I understand that. I have it right here in front of me.
Well,
And that doesn't serve our purpose of what the problem is.
we go back to talk about if you disturb 10,000 square foot, soil erosion, people going to get involved in. DDQ is going to get involved in. So an engineer is going to have to design that road, and you're not going to be able to put 4 houses somewhere that's not going to be 10,000 square feet. So at that point, for it to get through DDQ, like Clay says, it's got to be designed by an engineer. And my other thought is, if we're going to change this number, and I don't know what this number is going to change to, I'm just saying something. If we're going to change this number from 4 to 8, the developers are going to gain a whole lot more, so they need to put some skin in the game too.
And that would buttress the argument that the roads need to be built to a higher standard.
Yes.
Sorry, Francois.
Yes, Francois. Yeah.
When does a series of subdivisions and lines on a piece of paper become a planned development?
It doesn't unless it is done by the common owner and he designs it that way.
See?
Otherwise, you have basically this haphazard subdivisions of the property, which is the opposite of a planned use development.
But the density would be defined by whether it's zoned R1 or R2. Or
That would certainly be a factor.
Well, yes, but we're thinking.
That's where the density
When,
But it's only a planned unit development if the developer develops it as a planned unit development.
so it could be 4, it could be 2, or is it 10?
It could be 2. If I've got, and Madison County is a perfect example because we have so many mountaintops where you could have pretty spectacular home sites. You could have a subdivision of exactly 2 lots and, it commands fairly premium prices. And the developer of that would certainly want to put in a decent road and he would want to have a mechanism to, make sure that the neighbors up there have certain responsibilities as they go that road. So, yeah, I mean, that's it. That could happen in Madison County. I think it's Entitled County that has a subdivision, a planned unit subdivision in Madison, 2 lots.
All right, so looking at what, and so that's our discussion at this point is new versus extended, which we could probably work with, everything being brought up. Family, we have to decide what direction you want us to go as far as the road goes only for the family division, whether it's 1 lot extension or more. Let's see. And the main thing that caused this was only 4 lots on private drives. That means the next group of 4 lots or 1 lot or whatever has to make his own way to the public road somehow, which is impossible sometimes. So trying to fix all, like the property we just had up at Banco. I mean, we have this all the time. We should be able to fix it so that we have standards, we can enforce a road maintenance agreement, we can have not these issues come before the county that create hardship with neighbors and whatever, all because it wasn't taken care of going forward at least. So that's my issue on it.
If it would be okay, Orange looks like they have some pretty good things on private roads and maintenance. If I could meet with, I know I wasn't able to meet last time, if we could sit down, if I could come and, I mean, since I administer it and kind of live with it every day, maybe know some of the issues and problems. And I understand where everyone's coming from. If maybe between now and the next work session, we could find a time, even if it's at 5 o'clock sometime, I could meet with you. I think if we sat down, I think we could, not that I could create any magic or anything, but I think if I sat down with you and kind of explained to you where I think where we want to go with this, maybe we could come back in a month with a little more clearer proposal. If that would be okay
It would be fine. We have mostly we do have our meetings at 5 early because we have folks who still have jobs. Even
What's
some
wrong
of us
with
that are
people?
retired still have jobs. But no, I mean we I don't want to make it earlier in the middle of the day or whatever if they
Right.
can't
So
come.
if we could find a time that I could come and we could maybe,
And that's fine. And we also want the legal advice, not that we'll run it by our Mr. Greg later, of course, after we come up with something. But we had a lot of questions, all these questions, as you can see, and we don't know where anybody wants us to go at this point, other than we know we need to do something. And I think we've gotten a lot of things cleared with our members now as to what means what, and a few more tonight. And I think we can do something, but we need to have the approval of, or at least the input of what the powers that be want to, and what they're expecting or want to see. We can do that.
Jonathan has documents that he's given over to Leggett. And I think maybe we can-
Well, we looked at that one very closely. It's this one.
Yeah, the one that Mr. Gregg circulated.
It's fine on some areas, but it's not fine. I mean, there's some parts of it that are very good. But I've got copies of 10 different counties. Some of them very thorough, with even more stuff, including, like, Culpeper's is very different than this in a way. I think what we ought to do is pick out the things that we really want. Like this one, the very first one, you're not going to like this. Let me just read it. All rights of way created as part of a subdivision or any other means shall be dedicated to the county on the record plat, unless otherwise specifically provided for in this ordinance.
I would think you talk about those standards, and that's been like one of the bigger talks.
That's one of the bigger things.
Wouldn't standards be triggered by quantity of how many are on the road?
We talked
So
about that.
If you go to 10, you build to VDOT stand, and just making it up. But come up with a recommendation, and then we'll go from there. I mean, we know it dives into everything as ordinance do.
Orange County's done that for us in some way,
Yeah.
but that's the problem that
Well,
he had with this.
that was where Pete
That's
saw
what
the
we were
problem.
saying. I mean, we've already been through that. And I looked at, nobody else has quite that I've found. I mean, the ones I've looked at so far, except for the state standards. Something quite like this. I've asked a couple of people to look at it on their, they're just doing it voluntarily. It depends on which direction we want to go. Believe me, if you're putting in a new subdivision and you need to build it to some standard, that developer, like you said, is going to make his money. He go pass it on.
It's going to go up to some standard. Just subdividing land into 2 lots should warrant separate standard.
And right. Well, that's true.
So make a recommendation to us. You've got a committee
But-
with smart people. Good Lord.
Should we always have a road maintenance agreement for every single private drive?
That's the one
So how
thing
can you have a
cost
road
there.
maintenance agreement without some sort of standard?
Existing standard when it's solid.
What?
Start there. I mean, you've got to start somewhere, right? I mean, that's what I'm getting to.
Sean,
I mean,
excuse me, brother.
Yeah.
Sean, if we set a standard, is the county liable for that standard if we set it and it fails?
We would include in the provision, and we've been doing this since at least 1971. We make it very clear that the county is not going to put any money
Okay.
into maintenance or anything else.
Okay.
Yeah, I think every one of the ones I've read, every single one of them say that. No upkeep, no this, no that, no snow removal, no.
And I think our current ordinance, and I thought I'd given y'all, did I not give you all a packet?
No, I just got this.
No, well, I know you got me copies.
It's the article of road and access standards, sir.
Well, it had, it started with, basically I copied it from Orange.
We had the copy of that.
Got this. This is what I copied for you all, just
Well,
and gave you the
the
first
committee
pages.
had it, yeah.
Yeah. All right, well,
That was the one where it
Then-
started with.
and then the
dedication right away
state.
to the county. That was their first
You had the
paragraph.
state. No, we didn't. I mean, I gave it to them. At the planning agenda thing, I think you gave it out to them, but we didn't get it until.
I don't know where my copies are, but I had them for you, but in any
Right.
event, Jonathan has them, we can make additional copies. I mean, the idea is or the idea of the memorandum of the road standards is
Yeah.
kind of helps us avoid stuff.
Mhm.
And just to clarify, right, and we'll figure that out then, and we're going to have a meeting, our committee, before
Yeah.
the next workshop.
Committee has those copies, right?
Yes.
So that's-
The other thing was the road maintenance agreement. I asked, should we don't need to provide one according to the legal thing. We would have some available for example with what we want, and we look for what we have. But if they provide the road maintenance agreement, we decide that it's acceptable or not. Is that it?
You have the discretion, and what I would anticipate, you say the road maintenance agreement acceptable to the council.
Right. And so we need to know what that would be. Like, what would it
Some
have?
of them may require more. If the property is all in bottom land, it may not require the same type of, grading that something is on a hillside. My experience has been that gravity affects things.
Water seeks the lowest level.
On a slope.
Right. So that's the way we'd handle that, but we would have examples or an example of minimal things that need to be in it. So, any other questions? Okay.
Okay. Any other comments for Faye or questions? To the public, yes.
Yes, if I may, Chairman, this particular issue is of importance to me. I live on a private drive, and this here are 4 lots and 5 houses. One of the houses that just added recently, there's no type of maintenance agreement on this. Parties don't really discuss that type of maintenance agreement. I've been over the years, I've seen them taking care of the road myself. I would like a little financial help, and I don't know how legally I can enforce that issue. Now, if the board decides they want to do away with this more than one thing, it'd be really nice if it's something when they're directly active, but the maintenance on these particular private drives. If that's not possible, then if another one is added, then somebody should be responsible at that point. If another house is added, and I strongly suspect in this one particular lot, another house will be added in the near future. So I would just like to have that considered and addressed without a lot of argument between the neighbors or whatever, now to legally be enforced this maintenance agreement. I strongly suspect that any maintenance agreement that you have, there's probably gonna be a disagreement between the neighbors on when to put another 20 tons of gravel on the road. I don't know how to get by that myself. I like Pete's idea about an engineering plan on new roads or whatever, and maybe even on, if another lot is added, maybe 5 lots of the road that might be approved. I don't know, but I understand that some roads are not, don't have to be maintained as other roads do. So that is a consideration that I would love to see something that be retroactive, if legally possible. Okay, if this 4-in-1 building is going to go with, or even if it's not, if there is some way to address that issue in the county for safety and maintenance purposes. Not to diverge too much, but on this glamping facility, thing on the 40 acres, I never heard anybody address the 911 issue. I heard of golf carts going up and down the roads, but I didn't hear anything about the ambulance and maybe get back to these facilities. I think maybe someone ought to back out to 911 people, how they feel about that. The other issue is, I'm curious about this thing about, do we really now have to have a business license if we have a short-term rental? That's something totally new to me. Did I hear that correctly? No. Okay. Thank you. I guess so.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Yes.
Big thing on the 4-in-1. One thing we did not address tonight, the Kim folks got that, but as long as this county is allowing a trailer to be put on a half an acre of grandfathered land, we need to address that. And if you want to see a mess, a complete 100% look like a bomb went off, go down to Main Baptist Church Road. And those folks are not going to pay a dime to help maintain that road. It is a disaster. Right down there, you'll have to go to get your front end aligned. Go ahead and do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, we had one additional thing I think we asked to be take a look at. This is just introducing this. The board has asked us to look again at this idea of an auxiliary dwelling unit on a property that's not large enough to, in other words, if it's like 5.9 acres in agriculture and they want to have a house for a son to live and take care of a parent or something like that. So they've asked us to take a look at this. I hesitate to ask our standing committees to work on this right now because they're pretty busy. But Pete, do you think you're far enough along on this short-term rental unit to take a look at that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll task the chair, the Business, Industrial, and Sign Committee to take a look at that. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes.
would, real quick.
Mhm.
Yes, so this auxiliary dwelling unit came up. I've been approached twice in the last couple of months for one elderly man has 5.8 acres, would like to build another house on his property for his daughter to live in and take care of him. And then I had another gentleman, he's got 4.7 acres in ag. He wants to build a small house for his grandmother. So he wanted to know, of course, they went to Ligon and Ligon told him, no, you can't do that because that's another use. And in order to have another use in ag, you've got to have 6 acres. So, so when we interviewed you, James, and you, Mike, one of the questions as the board asked you guys was, what, how can we go about increasing affordable housing in Madison? Well, I didn't have an answer to that when we interviewed you, quite frankly. But then since then, I've gotten these calls from these individuals like they're at first glance, and let me say that, at first glance, this looks like a way to do that, okay? But that's why the board approved the motion to have the planning commission look into this and look into the pros and cons of this. Because now, obviously, I've told both of these individuals that if something like this, that it was going to go to the planning commission for a recommendation to the board. But understand that if you were to do something like this, you would never be able to divide this property and sell this other unit off fee simple. Okay, you would not be able to do that. So, yeah, so all that kind of stuff. But anyhow, that's how this came up. I presented it to the other four board members up here, and we all unanimously agreed that we'd like to see the planning commission make a recommendation on this. That's all I got.
That's not something the BZA board could do. I know our ordinance says 6 acres.
The BZA, as I understand it, has turned those down every time that's come before them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so Peter and his committee will begin taking a look at that then. Okay, the last thing, I guess I just skipped it. We know the comprehensive plan review is coming up. I'm recommending that we set up a steering committee to kind of set the parameters for the review and the timeline. If possible, I would like, and I know I'm putting more work on my committee chairs, but I'd like my committee chairs, maybe anyone who's served on the previous review, to maybe work with that. I don't think we need to do a lot of extensive meetings, but I think we probably need to meet perhaps once to get started on this and just outline where we're going to begin. To begin with, we're going to need to set a start date and a finishing date. So that's one of the things we'll have to do. Also, I'd like to ask Ligon to sit in with us and help on that too. Any comment or question on that? That's just a preliminary introduction right now. I'll be sending out some emails and asking for suggestions. Okay. Any other comment on that?
Well, the only comment I'd have is that at our last workshop, Ligon expressed an interest in taking the lead, if I understand you correctly, on this.
Well,
So I think it's a question of how we work together, not so much how,
yeah,
having Ligon sit in.
the planning commission is tasked with the review.
Yeah, right.
So,
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, I work
it's
with
appropriate
you.
for
I
Ligon
can lead
to-
you. I've done
Yeah.
comprehensive plan. I thought we'd use a little bit of the planning district to outsource a few small things too. But I think between the planning commission and myself, we could work out something that would work out pretty well.
Yeah, but that's exactly what we need to sit down.
Right.
Maybe once in a month or so and work out an outline for what we're going to do and some kind of a timeline. Then when we get closer to the time when we're going to present, maybe the steering committee might be responsible for maybe editing and putting everything together and presenting. Okay. Any other comment or question? Okay. We'll hopefully be able to get some of this other stuff out of the way before we start really working on that. All right. Any other questions, comments, anything we want to add? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So
moved, second. Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Thank you.
I would be happy to.
Yeah.
Basically took the lead the last time.
Yeah, I'm hoping for our experience.
But I think Ligon's interest is welcome.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I'm afraid of frost
I
coming.
know, and I just want to see another good picture.
No, absolutely.
All right, thanks. Much appreciated.